In trying to understand the way that others affect our individual behavior, one of the topics that we have to take a look at is the topic of aggression. Now, this is kind of interesting just because there are certain times and places where aggression is encouraged on the basketball court or in really striving to get what you want, even in an academic setting. Sometimes being aggressive, in pursuing what you want, can make you look like a very determined person, someone who might be good for a job or something like that. But there are other times where aggression can be very off-putting, and it will hinder maybe your ability to get what you want. And so I want to look at some of the social psychology theories surrounding this idea of aggression. There are two types of aggression according to social psychology. The first is hostile aggression. Hostile aggression is any aggression that is motivated by anger. So when you get your dander up, right, when somebody makes you mad, and then you do something aggressive, that's hostile aggression. And basically, the point or what you're wanting to get out of the aggression is some type of harm to whoever the object of that aggression is. So if somebody pushes you down in the hallway and you pop up and take a swing at them, right? That's hostile aggression, and your kind of goal is to cause them physical harm, right? If you connect on that punch, same thing if it was a hard foul on a basketball court, right? If your intent is to hurt, that's what's considered to be hostile aggression. It doesn't just have to be physical, though, right? Some of us are not as physically imposing as others, but we can lash out in more psychological ways, right? You say something that you know is really going to hurt the person. You attack some sort of self-esteem problemed area that they have, and so you really go. You're going, but your jabs are more mental than they are physical. But both of those, if they're motivated by anger, that's considered to be hostile aggression. There's also what's called instrumental aggression. This one's a little more subtle, and it's motivated by what you're going to get out of it. It's motivated by gain. So I'm going to be aggressive because there's something that I want. And so it could be power, it could be money, it could simply be I want people to pay attention to me. But what you do is you're aggressive because you want something out of it, right? So if somebody is romantically interested in somebody else and wants to catch their attention, right? Middle school boys are notorious for this, doing something stupid or being mean to a girl, or elementary kids pulling hair on the playground, right? That's instrumental aggression. It's not coming from a place of anger. It's coming from a motivation that I want to get this out of it. You can be aggressive in the stock market, right? Day trading. As I'm recording this video, there's this whole deal that's been going on the past couple of weeks with GameStop stock, and a group of people on Reddit that have decided that they don't like the way hedge funds manipulate the stock market, and so they've kind of turned that against the people who are running the hedge fund. So that's instrumental aggression. So it's aggression, but it's aggression used for a purpose. Now you can be instrumentally aggressive with physically. Now it doesn't come from a place of anger, but an old basketball coach that Indiana University had, a guy named Bob Knight, would always, was a big, tall guy, and would always, before the game, meet the opposing coach at half court for a little conversation, and he would usually put his arm around that person, and he was bigger than anybody he was doing that to, and so the physical envelopment, right? It's a psychological game, right? You're already asserting a certain dominance over the person in an attempt to further your cause or get your team an edge. So those are the two types of aggression that we see. There are also situations that can cause us to be more aggressive, and social psychologists have identified a couple of those. One, believe it or not, is heat. The hotter it gets, the higher temperatures, or the higher our tempers get, the higher the temperature gets. They've actually done studies that violent crime, assault, things like that increase during periods of extreme heat. So if a city's, for instance, having a heat wave, people are generally more aggressive when it's warmer. We don't have that same level of aggression when it's colder. Part of that could be because, if you remember from Psych 101, the part of our brain that regulates body temperature is also the part of the brain that controls anger and aggression. And so maybe there's some kind of connection that's going there. You can see violence in media, right? And it will cause us to be violent as well. And one of the big things, like I said, as I'm recording this, we're a couple of weeks out from the group that stormed the Capitol, trying to overturn the 2020 election. And one of the big worries was when that group did that on January 6th, that a couple of days later, they were going to do it in other places. Because we know that when people see things like that, a lot of times it can encourage people to be more violent. And so they were very vigilant about having people around, like local state houses. For instance, they had the Indiana State Police around the state house in Indianapolis, just in case something like that happened. Video games can make people aggressive, especially if you're playing, aggressive video games where you have to shoot or drive aggressively, things like that. They figured out that can build those aggressive feelings. And social rejection is another one. So if you don't feel like you fit in, that can cause people to really rebel against everything that society is standing for, and so they become aggressively kind of anti what that society does. We see that in a case like the Columbine shootings, where those young men shot up their high school. And as they examined kind of their journals and MySpace pages and things afterwards, they figured out that these were two fellows that just really didn't feel like they fit in anywhere, and took that aggression out, though, on innocent people because of a psychological issue that they were having. This is famously shown in psychology. You probably remember this from Psych 101. I'm going to put another different take on the video on our YouTube playlist here. But the Bobo doll experiment, where psychologist Albert Bandura decided to test whether seeing people be violent was a cathartic experience, whether it let you get rid of your own violent tendencies. What he figured out was it was actually the opposite. When we see people being violent, not only will we meet their level of violence, but a lot of times we up the level of violence that was there. There are a couple of other things that will affect this. One is culture. There are cultural effects on aggression. Different cultures, if you remember doing that individualistic versus collective culture project earlier, different cultures have different ideas of aggression. Different cultures are more aggressive than other cultures. Now, that doesn't mean it always has to stay that way, but there are usually conflicts that show up there. One example of this is the culture of honor. You see this a lot with kind of the period of time of our founding fathers. If you remember the story of Alexander Hamilton, men would duel over slights of, public slights. Somebody saying something about you, or somebody calling your honor into question was something to be defended with deadly force. You see the same thing in Southern culture in the 1800s and early 1900s, this idea that we have to defend our honor. And so that can be a cause for aggression when you feel like the foundational parts of you have been slighted. Finally, one of the factors that has a big influence on aggression is gender. And so we see that men are more physically aggressive. You probably just kind of intuitively knew that. But when you look at the statistics, it's really alarming. 99% of rape are committed by men, 88% of murders, 92% of robberies, and 87% of assaults. I was shocked seeing those statistics, but it definitely kind of corroborates this idea that men are more physically aggressive. What they found out is when women are aggressive, it's more relational. That's not always the case, but I think a lot of times, just if you think about it, it's the case. It's much more common for guys to come to blows over some sort of disagreement, and usually they can get over it pretty easy once the once the blood's dried. Guys usually can move on pretty quickly from those things. Relational aggression, though, is very different. Women can talk behind people's backs, do things to influence people in other ways that we don't see as maybe as aggressive, but those are more common forms of aggression coming from women. Now, like I said, it doesn't always mean that one group can't use one type and the other group can't use the other. But when we look at statistics, it tells us that gender is a determinant in aggression. So, as you think about this, maybe think about how aggressive you would say that you are. Are there situations maybe where you're more aggressive than in other situations? Maybe you're the type of person that shies away from confrontation. Maybe you're the type of person that likes to speed up the confrontation because you want to do it on your own terms. But everybody's kind of got their own style. Like I said, these are just some of the factors that can influence that.